How did you end up at CBS Sports Radio, now Infinity Sports Network? Like, were you poached, or did you reach out to them?
Um,
How did that conversation start?
I guess I was technically poached. There's a couple of like real personal life things that happened. Maggie Gray and I worked at Sports Illustrated together. She used to be the video presenter at Sports Illustrated, and when I was writing, I would come on with her. We got a great rapport. She was at WFAN. She got a big job where she took over for Mike Francesa. Francesca came back. They switched around their lineup, and she wasn't thrilled with her new spot. And so she talked to the people at Odyssey, which owns both then CBS Sports Radio and WFAN, and said, maybe I want to go to national instead of New York local. Then they needed a co-host, but she wanted to do a co-host. She called me up. The only downside with Dan Patrick's show, there was one major downside. It's in Milford, Connecticut, and I live in Brooklyn, New York. It was great. After the pandemic, everyone in New York got a car. It was taking me 2 hours to commute to work. So that was really putting a lot of pressure on me personally. It was a giant problem. I loved being at the Dan Patrick Show. There's no way I was looking around. But just as it was becoming very problematic to commute, and we couldn't move for my wife's job, Maggie came along. So poach isn't really the word I would use, but that opportunity came up and it kind of fit where I was with my life. I think if I had approached Dan and said, "Can I do some kind of hybrid?" he definitely would have done that. He was always really easy to work for. But my role in Dan Patrick Show, I had to be there. So I didn't have any other solution to how to deal with the commuting. Like Dan and the guy always say, "I don't understand how you do it, Perloff. How do you drive 2 hours?" It was a great job. That's how I did it. But it was becoming too much. So it worked out. It was just one of those fate things where Maggie called me up and my contract was coming up and Dan was really gracious about it. So it was time to move on.
You were doing that commute the entire time?
Yeah. Well, no, I started with Dan and I was at Sports Illustrated. I actually did the show from the New York City office of Sports Illustrated via remote. And then the radio show went on DirecTV. I don't know if you remember when Dan in many ways invented radio on TV. It was the first show to ever do it at really high level. So he said, "Hey, you know what, Andrew, why don't you jump in that Honda Accord and drive up here every day? I know it's a lot, but it will add a lot if you're here." And through the years, my original role was to run the website and to help Dan edit his Sports Illustrated column. Then I just evolved into on air. And once that started, I had to be there in person. So I did that drive for 11 years. I know every exit on the BQE, the infernal BQE, Brooklyn Queens Expressway.